Hello, can everyone hear me now? Am I good? Am I. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Everyone can hear me. Fantastic. Sorry, there's about a 30-second delay whenever I talk. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know what just happened, but for whatever reason, it decided to break my microphone here. OBS has been kind of dumb lately. I've had a lot of issues with OBS lately, so I do apologize. But I guess we'll start all over again. But I do hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. My name is Paul, and welcome back to the new news, everybody. Sorry for the technical problems. There's always bound to be some where you are doing it live, folks. But as I'm sure you've heard already, if you are interested in the stuff going on and what's happening in the world around you, there's a lot of stuff happening throughout the world. A lot of good stuff happening today, which is nice to see for once, because this does kind of get depressing. But on the other hand, there is still some pretty bad stuff happening too. And the whole point of this project here at the New News is to raise money and raise awareness. We're raising money and we're raising the awareness about different situations ongoing throughout the world. And we're trying to raise money to help people, that are affected by those situations. Whether you're talking about the war in Ukraine, you're talking about, different climate change effects, whether you're talking about natural disasters, you're talking about, famine and whatever else is going on in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, and just different situations all over the globe as they arise. And so 80% or more of all of the donations that organizations we have listed receive in the description actually go to the programs. I mean, they actually get to help people. So not only are we here to inform you as the public and let you know about what's happening in the world around you, but trying to raise money and put some good back into the world, considering how awful a lot of these situations are. And I'm happy to report that yesterday I was able to finish up going through and vetting several different organizations. We have 6 brand new organizations which were actually given to us. They were suggested to us by you guys as the viewers. So it's awesome. Please keep those coming. If you have more organizations or individuals that we can work with and we can vet and we can, collaborate on to actually raise money and help people throughout the world, please continue to send them to us. Ones we have added right now, the 6 that we have are Mercy Corps, which is an international aid group. They provide medical assistance and medical training all throughout the world. We also have Refugees International. Their whole point of that organization is to go through and they actually help refugees from all sorts of situations that are ongoing throughout the world. We also have the International Medical Corps, very similar to the Mercy Corps. They go through and they also provide medical assistance, medical training, and they also provide first responder assistance to different crises throughout the globe too. We have Action Against Hunger, which is an organization dedicated to fighting hunger and poverty throughout the world, and that includes places, especially in places like Africa and in some of the poorer regions of, say, Southeast Asia, and also places throughout the Middle East and what have you. So a lot of good work that they're doing too. We have CARE. CARE provides a lot of different services to all different types of walks of life or whatever the needs. Infrastructure improvements, medical work, humanitarian efforts for clean food, clean water, assisting and providing education, improving job training and employment improvements. As well as going through and they're trying to work on trying to end poverty in a lot of these areas where poverty is extremely high, and trying to lift and trying to just overall getting getting a lot of these locations just into a better setting, a better lifestyle. So CARE is a pretty awesome organization too. And the last one that we were able to vet was AMREF Health Africa, which is an organization that is dedicated just to working in Africa. They provide and assist in building up humanitarian or building up medical services, medical training, and information for the general population, such as contraceptives and things like that. and just general testing for things like Ebola and assisting with all medical things there in Africa. So once again, 80% or more of all the donations those organizations do receive actually go to their programs and actually go to helping people within their respective programs. So be sure to check them all out. Thank you very much for suggesting those. I'm happy that we're finally able to get them. If you want, they are in the description of this, as well as many others. We're over 30,000 characters in our description now. To be able to cover this, to cover all of these organizations. We want to be able to fill out that 4,000 characters in total. You can also find them on our website and on our Discord, which are listed there too. So if you want to check those out. And you can also get the map that I'm using. I have it published on our website too. If you go under our works and daily maps in 2022, down there and under November, you can follow along with me. And with that, we're going to get ready to get into the news here. There's quite a bit of it over the last 48 hours. Please, if you are interested if you want to, if you have questions, a lot of this stuff is conflict, and a lot of this is very difficult to answer, or very difficult to comprehend in a lot of ways. Not everyone obviously served in the military. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm watching the live chat. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments throughout the entire duration of the stream. To give you a little bit of background on myself, so you can understand my kind of background and what I'm well voiced in, my expertise. I started in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020 as an O-352 anti-tank missileman. I was a corporal, and I started with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. I did 2 tours to the Middle East. My first tour was between October of 2017 and March of 2018, where I went and I deployed for 4.5 months in the country of Syria, with about a month and a half that I spent in Kuwait in transit and training. My second deployment was between October of 2019 through about March of 2020. And I was the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait with Easy Company 27. And then I went to the Baghdad Embassy Complex as one of the 100 Marines that responded to the ongoing crises and protests there. On New Year's of 2020. I was also there for the assassination of General Qassam al-Soleimani. And then I also went to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines who were getting ready to deploy to Yemen, down there in the Red Sea. So I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I am also, of course, a team leader, but I'm a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I am a fully cross-trained rifleman. I'm a partially cross-trained radio operator, and I'm also a combat lifesaver Marine. So I have had medical training on top of that from Navy Corpsmen. So I did pass the CLS course. So if you have any questions, especially on small leadership tactics, anti-armor warfare, armored stuff, I am more than happy to go and answer those questions for you if you have them. And if you have anything outside of that spectrum, I will try to answer it to the best of my ability, but I'm not an expert in everything. Though I try to be well-rounded, I'm very interested in geopolitics and history and many other subjects. I'm not an expert in everything, but with subject matter expert or not, I implore you as a viewer, please do your own research. Please go through if any of this interests you and do your own research. There's no substitute for it, and I very much implore you to do that. And with that, we get ready to roll right here into the news. I'm seeing a lot of people joining in here. Let's see. And before we get into Ukraine, I did see that Army Commander Conscriptovich was quoted today, give thanks to Nuclear. Quote, "We have successfully retreated from Kherson with minimal losses. Kherson is still Russia, though. Do not be confused. They wanted to join us." Army Commander Conscriptovich. And so with that, we jump down here and into Ukraine, and we actually start way north in Ukraine. We start here right along the Ukrainian-Belarusian border, and that's because Ukraine is constructing a border wall with Belarus. They're creating a reinforced, basically border wall with Belarus. It's become, Belarus not only is it a Russian puppet state, but in and of itself as a Russian puppet state, even though it hasn't directly entered the war, it's a possibility that it may enter the war here very shortly. And we've seen quite an extensive military buildup in this area. So what we're seeing here is that Ukraine is still constructing a border wall, or it has started constructing a border wall. It's reinforced concrete barriers with concertina wire, razor wire on the top of it. And we actually jumped down here to Borodyanka. We haven't talked about Borodyanka for a long time. And Borodyanka saw some horrendous atrocities committed to it. A lot of Borodyanka was just destroyed. I mean, utterly destroyed back in February, March, and April during the beginning of the war. And since then, what we have seen is that Banksy, actually, for the first time, this is the first thing that Banksy has publicly posted that he... For those who don't know, Banksy is a street artist. He's a graffiti artist. He's very famous. He's done works. What he does is he goes to places with a lot of political unrest or controversy, or he makes very big... He goes, and his art is about political statements. There's some very beautiful pieces, but he did stuff... he's done stuff down in Israel, about Israel and Palestine. He's done stuff in the United Kingdom. He's done stuff in France regarding the immigration crisis or the migrant crisis for them, and kind of the animosity against migrants regarding it. He's done a lot of stuff, and he's finally made his way to Ukraine, where one of his artworks has actually appeared on one of the ruined buildings here in Borodyanka. And we do actually have photos of this. So this is once again Banksy. This is his official. Would appear Twitter here, that they have quoted. I don't know if it's his Twitter or what, but you can see here, that is the artwork. It is on a destroyed building. It's on a destroyed apartment building there in Borodyanka. So, very, very, very beautiful, and very telling. He once again, these are very powerful images. So that's not the only one. We've seen a lot of artworks like this that have been popping up lately, and it's believed that Banksy has actually been running around Ukraine a little bit, and actually been kind of going around different parts of Ukraine. He's anonymous. No one knows who Banksy actually is, but all sorts of different things have been popping up lately that are usually in his style. So that's something that's noticed. But that was the first one that he has actually confirmed that yes, I have done this. So really cool to see. Really cool to see. We come down into Kyiv, where we see that 45 more prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners of war, have been returned home. Another exchange has taken place. And they've returned 2 bodies of fallen Ukrainian troops back to Ukraine as well. And this is being posted. This is coming from Andriy Yermak. He posted this awesome photo here. All those guys very happy to be home. We also see coming from the Ukrainian parliament, who once again posted that photo, but we have several videos coming out today. Very short. Take a look.
Вітаю на Україні!
Слава Україні!
Все, друже, дома?
Майже дома. Дома, в
Та
принципі.
ні, вже дома, ти не майже
Друге
дома.
повітря. Наше повітря.
Все, друже.
So it's pretty awesome to see. It's pretty awesome to see. Once again, they're getting returned home, which is awesome. Now, several different holidays, several different things are being celebrated today. Ukraine, of course, is celebrating the liberation of Kherson and many other places in the Kherson and Mykolaiv Oblast. Poland is celebrating Independence Day, which we'll cover here when we get to the international news. And the United States is celebrating Veterans Day today. The United Kingdom is celebrating Armistice or Remembrance Day. November the 11th was Armistice Day during World War I, which is how Veterans Day and Remembrance Day fall on the same time. The Armistice on World War I fell on November the 11th at, I believe, 11 a.m. So there's actually a very good, the BBC, I believe, is the one that put it together several years ago, of the moment the guns fell silent. I highly recommend you go and give it a listen yourself. Very, very beautiful, and very telling. Now, they couldn't record the actual sounds, but they went through and they recreated it, and it allowed it to, basically, they allowed it to the point where But they did record the actual vibrations of the explosions in the battlefield because it's how they could track gunfire at the time. It's very well done. So I highly recommend it. But as a result of today being Veterans Day in the United States, President Zelensky here in the United Kingdom, or in the Ukraine, actually went and gave a Veterans Day address to the United States in English for us to give it a listen. So take a look.
On behalf of all Ukrainians, happy Veterans Day and thank you for your service. For almost 250 years, the men and women of the United States Armed Forces have prevailed against tyranny, often against great odds. Your example inspires Ukrainians today to fight back against Russian tyranny. Special thanks to the many American veterans who have volunteered to fight in Ukraine, and to the American people for the amazing support you have given Ukraine. With your help, we have stunned the world and are pushing Russian forces back. Victory will be ours. God bless America and Slava Ukraini.
So pretty awesome that he went through and he made a special address just for us. So pretty awesome. I'm kind of curious what he is saying. But we've seen quite a bit of good news coming out today. It's very uplifting news for the most part today. But of course, we do always have down here. This is in the Donetsk Oblast, and we go down here where we see the daily Donetsk update. This is coming from Pavel Krylenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He is also the governor of this region. But he's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Every single day, he goes out and he provides the previous 24 hours worth of update. He releases at 8 a.m. local time every single morning. And what he said today is, quote, on November the 10th, number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 8 killed, 5 injured. And we do get this from his official Twitter. And the Donetsk region is completely and utterly has been shelled beyond oblivion, and it's been some of the most fierce fighting of the entire war. Unfortunately, not a lot of information of what's happening in the Donetsk region has come out over the last 48 hours. So much emphasis has been put onto the Kherson Oblast. Unfortunately, that kind of has let everything else kind of very. It's really kind of. I'm trying to think of the word. Overshadowed everything else, I think is the best word to say. So it's very it's been very difficult to find anything. But regardless, the war still goes on in other places on the front lines, and not including occupied areas such as Mariupol or Volnovakha, where we know significant amounts of casualties have occurred. Unfortunately, since the beginning of the war on the February the 24th, 1,193 civilians have been killed and 2,583 civilians have been injured in the Donetsk Oblast alone. And some interesting stuff is starting to come out from the front. So was this good enough? So this is a Russian position. What they did is they took solar panels and they covered over their position, their little dugout, using solar panels as the top. So, yes, definitely the efficient way to use that stuff. And we jump over here to Nikopol, which is in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. And we see that Nikopol and Marivska were both shelled by Russian forces. Despite, for the Russians, the major setbacks today, they do still maintain some kind of kinetic energy on the majority of the front lines. We're seeing quite a significant amount of shelling in other places. And we do see that happening here as well. This is from the National Police of Ukraine on their official Twitter. They released the fact that several different rockets actually impacted both in Nikopol and Myriivska. You can see right here, this is actually... So, a lot of people don't realize this, but this is actually something that you do. So, the point of this... Now, if you notice, there's tape measures. And what you can do in... I was shown how to do it, but I do not know how to do it very well. I don't really remember how to do it. So, I apologize if I screw this up for anyone that isn't actually an expert in this. But you can actually determine where the shell came from by observing the crater. There's a lot of telling things that can be left out of whatever is left out of the crater, and that actually can show you the angle that it actually came into, and it actually shows you what type of. Usually, it will give you an idea of what type of artillery struck that area. It will tell you where it came from, because you can actually back azimuth this, and using a lot of math and trigonometry and stuff that I just may not be very good at or completely understand. But you can actually take measurements of the crater itself, and it'll actually be able to. You can tell exactly where. You can actually pull a grid and tell where this shell actually came from. And that used to be actually the way, before they had counter battery radars and everything, that is actually the way that you would do counter battery fire back against them. And if you don't have a radar, artillery guns and artillerymen, mortarmen are still actually trained on how to do this, which is really cool, because technology does fail too. So that is why they have tape measures out, and they're actually recording and measuring this stuff, because you can actually do math, and you can actually find where the artillery, not just what type of artillery round it is, where it came from, how far it flew, find pretty much the exact location. I believe it's within about 100 meters of accuracy, I believe is what it is, if you do it right, of where this round actually came from. And also, one of them ended up striking, of course, a building here. It looks like a utility building. And before we get into that whole mess of stuff, we jump down here actually to Crimea. And what we find is that a road construction company is actually building the defensive line. So this area right here is, I'm going to try and say this. This area right here is known as Ganishskaya Gorka, which is a part of this area in the northeastern part of Crimea. Okay. And what this is it's what's been happening. And we saw this in satellite images on our last stream. And we are seeing some more up close stuff here. So this is the road construction company. It's actually the largest one in Russia, and it's called Avtoban. And what they do is they have been contracted, aka they've actually been conscripted to actually come into here, and they're actually using their heavy equipment to build a proper defensive line in Crimea, which is very telling, because it tells us that there's that Russia is already considering the possibility that they will not be able to hold on to pretty much any of the gains that they have made since the beginning of the war. There's actually a question into that as to whether or not that's happening. Or that's something that they are actually able to do militarily. And so as a result, they actually they're actually at this point looking at building a defensive line here in the northern part of Crimea to actually maintain the holdings that they have had since at basically the pre-2014 or the post-2014 pre-invasion borders. So that's what we're seeing here. We do actually have video footage of this. So this is the Avtoban construction construction company out of Russia, who is actually building this defensive line in Crimea. So what we see here, so that's them actually building a defensive line here. And that allows us to move up here and into the Kherson Oblast. And wow, today has been huge. As you can see, there's a really, really big change to our map, if you have seen it before. So that map, our lines have not moved in 2 weeks ish, very slightly, very minimal, because there was very little information coming out. Well, as you can tell now, this now front line runs straight down the center of the Dnipro River. Because Ukraine has retaken all of this bank of the Kherson Oblast, all of it. And I do mean all of it. I mean, so we start off here. So Razvatisa is back in season here in the Kherson Oblast. And the Razvatisa, for those who don't know, the Razvatisa is this really thick mud. It's very well known here in Ukraine. It's that really thick mud that you saw at the very beginning of the war that Russian vehicles were quite literally sinking in. That is happening again. And that happens every spring and every winter as the seasons change. And that thick mud bogs troops down on foot, let alone armored vehicles. And we're starting to see that becoming an issue once again, which is definitely going to slow down any offensives in the war. But you can see here, this is a Humvee. Looks like it's got the Class A armor package on it, which is the lighter armor package, the initial armor package that they put on these things. And it's already bogged down in this mud. Take a look. So... And so that's going to be pretty much every vehicle that you're looking at. I mean, Humvees, yes. Tanks, yes. Infantry fighting vehicles, yes. Basically, everything will get bogged down in this stuff. It's almost completely impassable. And we're going to see that probably for the next several months until the ground really freezes over. That permafrost here actually sets in and actually allows for armored vehicles to get back in on the move. But it's also, there's been some talk that it may actually be a warmer winter for Ukraine. It will still be very cold, but it will be a warmer winter, which could actually prolong this Razvatisa season and actually cause a very short window in the middle of the winter, the dead middle of the winter, where they can actually maneuver forces over off-road terrain. As opposed to sticking with roads. But this causes vehicles to have to stick to roads, and that makes it very difficult to actually maneuver forces. And really all that does is it bottlenecks troops on both sides, and it really slows the pace of combat. This is the very same killer that we saw for the Russians at the beginning of the war, and for the Ukrainians who are currently on the counteroffensive, this could also become an issue for them as they're trying to conduct major offensive actions. So it's plausible right now that the Russians at this point are pretty much starting to dig in and prepare for winter as they try and wait out the Ukrainians and try to bolster forces over the wintertime, where the fighting should be a little bit more slow, a little bit less kinetic, and just be basically stacked defensive positions on both sides and just constant artillery shelling. We shouldn't see we're probably not going to see as many huge offensive actions as we've seen in the Kharkiv Oblast and the Kherson Oblast as well. But that allows us to get into some of the big stuff that's happened. Of course, there, as you can see, we have a lot of flags on there today, and every flag is a liberated city. And this doesn't cover all of them. It just covers the ones that we have photos and videos of. There's still a lot of small villages and stuff too. But we see here, this is in Borozensky, was liberated by Ukrainian troops. You can see them with the flag there. This is them entering.
Відео підтвердження того, що ми справді в Брускінську. Сьогодні яке число? 9 листопада. Начальник озвучувати?
Ні,
Не озвучувати.
просто начальник.
Просто начальник наш. Просто
Троє
це
відважних бойових
побратимів. Так, я себе зніму.
This is Chokolove. Now, if you do look up Chokolove, it will actually automatically bring you down here to this one. This is Chokolove, and this one is still under occupation. There's actually two in the Kherson Oblast. You have one on the south side of the Dnipro River, and you have one on the northern side of the Dnipro, technically the west and east, or left and right. And this one, you can actually look in. It's a small village over here, but this one has been liberated here on the left or eastern side of the Dnipro River, or sorry, western side of the Dnipro River. It's also Lend-Lease 2.0 here. The Russians left a lot of equipment behind. Even though they were trying to pull out and do that tactical withdrawal, that last bit of the withdrawal was so quick that they left a ton of stuff. And it's even supposed that up to 10,000 Russian troops were left behind too. I mean, entire battalion tactical groups of troops just left behind by the Russian forces, simply because they didn't get the memo, or they were just completely left behind and the bridges were blown. And we'll get to some of that too. But there's just a ton of ammunition and equipment still being left behind in these Russian lines, which we're seeing here. I mean, they packed up and left in a hurry. They left as pretty much everything that they couldn't. They pretty much left everything but themselves and whatever trucks they're using to leave. So, once again, Ukraine, in their own words during the Kharkiv offensive, said that they do not accept gifts from murderers and rapists, and so every single item will be returned to sender as soon as physically possible. So that means that they intend to fire all of these back at the Russians. Come down here. This is in Zmivka, and we see that Zmivka was also liberated, which is right here on the bank of the Dnipro River. It was liberated earlier. It was liberated very early this morning, from my understanding, so it's still dark out. So they have been liberated. Right down the road from then, of course, we've heard a lot of this city is Berislav. Berislav was liberated as well right here. This is just on the right side, just to the east of the city of Novokakhovka, which we've seen quite an extensive amount of. Novokakhovka, they did blow a section of the roadway and the railway to make sure it is impassable. So that has sunk. They did not destroy the entirety of the dam, though, just the roadway and the railway. Once again, Berislav, once again, right here on the Dnipro River itself, has been liberated. Little to no resistance at this point from any Russian forces. They quite literally dashed across the entirety of the Kherson Oblast. And there they are, right there in front of the sign of Berislav. But they're finding a lot of things already. They're finding a lot of stuff already. And what we're finding is a very similar to scene to the mad dash out of Ukraine that the Russians took that really, I believe it was their first Army Corps, took at the beginning of the war, when they left out of the northern regions, out of Kiev, out of Sumy, and out of the Chernihiv Oblast. We're seeing a lot of the same stuff, very widespread pillaging and booby trapping that has been happening all across this area for some time, and that is really what the Ukrainians are running into once again. We have, of course, the actual search for things hasn't started yet. The actual search for a lot of these atrocities have not either been reported or have not been found yet, or the research really hasn't started. But we're just seeing a lot of pillaging that has taken place, and that's very evident. It's very open. We're seeing just a ton of it from the coming from the Russian side. Of course, we were seeing this in satellite footage well before, and drone footage well before this was actually before these regions were actually liberated. So we already knew that this was happening, unfortunately. And for those that don't know, under the 1949 Geneva Convention, pillaging is a war crime. And to do it on a systematic scale, such as what we've seen throughout the entirety of the Kherson Oblast, that is actually a crime against humanity. And that really rolls into our next point, which is booby traps have been found. A lot of mines and a lot of booby traps. Unfortunately, that is what we're seeing. Very similar, once again, to the northern part, say like the Kiev Oblast. We're seeing a lot of landmines. These are anti-personnel mines. Anti-tank mines, as we've seen a lot of them. And you can see here, this is a hand grenade that has been taped to a tree. Another anti-tank mine. Buried there in the ground. So, yeah, we're seeing that is what we're seeing. And once again, it's day one, right? We don't know everything. We haven't even really begun to see it. Today is the day of festivities and being happy about the fact that this region has been liberated. But unfortunately, as we all know, and as we've seen time and time and time and time again now throughout the duration of this war, initially there's a lot of joy and it's a really good day. But as we know, the days and the weeks that follow are usually not good, because that's when the facts of what happened under occupation start to come to light, and unfortunately a lot of tragedy comes from that. So while everyone is very happy, as they rightfully should be, unfortunately we also know that tomorrow is likely going to be a very dark day as we go through a lot of this stuff. Over here, of course, the rest of the Mykolaiv Oblast has been cleared as well. We're seeing a lot of places that were actually liberated as a result. So we see right here, this is in Tamirn, which was liberated. We also have Klevnivka here, which was right here on the Yenhulets River. That was also liberated. And we go down here, and we have a couple of other locations. So we're seeing that demining is probably going to take quite a few years. And this is not uncommon. If you go to say the Ardennes forest in France, there are entire places that are considered no-go zones. So not even EOD personnel are allowed to go into the parts of the Ardennes, because there's so much ordnance from just World War I, let alone World War II, that is too dangerous even for them to go through. Fields, French farmers, whenever they are plowing and tilling their fields, they actually have to go through. And they actually have to, when they're plowing their fields to start, getting ready to sow seeds every single spring, They literally will just dig up hand grenades and artillery shells and everything, and they'll take these and they just pile them in piles on the side of the fields. It's they call it the steel harvest. Every single year there's the steel harvest, and EOD bomb squads just drive around France, and all they do is they pick up old hand grenades and stuff that have been sitting in fields for the last 100 years, 70 years, however long they've been laying there from the two world wars, and they just pick them up on the side of the road and just every year. I mean, so in Vietnam's a really good example of landmines being really detrimental to civilian populations. I mean, people still are killed every single year in Cambodia, in Thailand, and in Vietnam every single year because of how many people are killed from landmines that have been sitting there since the war in Vietnam. So it's very terrible. Unfortunately, it's a long-standing effect, and we're going to see a lot of that here too. Both sides, neither side is actually party to the Ottawa Convention, which bans the usage of landmines. And we see a heavy amount of landmine usage by both sides in this war. And this is just from this right here is the amount of anti-tank mines that were cleared from a single road. One road. Today, one road. Just today. They're talking about finding hundreds of explosive objects in not even full square miles, not even full square kilometers. If you are in a part of the world that goes by kilometers, they are finding them in parts. I mean, they literally can go out into any acre of land in Ukraine and essentially find unexploded ordnance anywhere. It is insane. Jumping down here to the Yasenovsky Bridge, which we know has been destroyed. So the Yasenovsky Bridge, what was left of it, it was heavily damaged. We already knew that. The HIMARS made short work of that. And what we see is, what we end up seeing is that of course, once again, they left thousands of Russian troops reportedly behind, as well as much of their equipment. And we see videos of Russian soldiers that are trying to flee across the bridge after the Russians actually blew and collapsed sections of the Yasenovsky Bridge. So they did completely actually collapse sections of these bridges with shape charges. So here they are crossing the bridge, or here they are crossing on their own.
Ну, как я понимаю, паром оставляют на колесную технику и вообще на технику. Да ну я вижу, ну что сделать. Пусть хоть как-то туда уходит. Наши мальчишки идут.
This is from IZ, Russian state-run news organization. This is the detonation from part of the city of Kherson. You can actually see the detonation of the Yasenovsky Bridge here. I mean, a massive explosion. There's a ton of explosive power behind that. Then come over here. So here's the Yasenovsky Bridge after parts of it have been collapsed by Russian forces.
Ну и вот за моей спиной два обрушенных пролета Антоновского моста. Вероятно, он был подорван во время вывода российской группировки с правого берега на левый берег. Сейчас по ту сторону наших войск нет. Противник, судя по всему, к этому мосту с той стороны еще не подошел. Вот мы видим, подъезжают местные жители, которые хотели попасть на тот берег. Хотели на тот берег, да, попасть? Очень. На тот берег хотели попасть, да?
Да.
Там живете, да?
Да.
Ну, за Херсоном треба сходить.
Да, да. А що ви хотите?
Да не, ничего, видите, теперь никак.
And they collapsed several sections of the bridge. They didn't just collapse it in one place. Here's some drone footage of the detonation of the Antonovsky Bridge. I mean, it was a large, a lot of explosive power. Couple of different questions coming in. Some of them were kind of funny, some of them not. So Bruce Suburn says, I thought Ukrainians blew up the bridge. The Ukrainians used HIMARS systems and they cratered the bridge, similar to how you would crater an airfield. There comes a point in which you put enough holes in something and it really doesn't become useful for its intended purpose. The bridges, you don't have to collapse a bridge to render it no longer effective. And that's what the Ukrainians did. They hit the barge, they hit the barge bridge that was built underneath the Antonovsky Bridge, and they also hit the Antonovsky Bridge, putting it out of commission, because they put so much firepower onto it, and they put so many holes in it that structurally it wouldn't support any vehicles crossing it. So there wasn't any way to get across. And so it didn't matter. You don't have... It's extremely difficult to actually collapse a bridge. Building bridges and arches is about, that in and of itself, that's probably either the best, if not the second best thing that we have ever been able to do as a species behind warfare. We're really, really good at killing each other, and we're really, really good at building bridges and arches. I mean, really good at building bridges and arches. It's very difficult to make these things collapse purposefully, just because we've been doing it for so many thousands of years. So it's extremely difficult. We've perfected it. And so it takes a lot of firepower to actually collapse it, which is why they had to use so many explosives to collapse the sections of the Antonovsky Bridge that they did collapse. But no, these happened last night. These were, the Russian forces said, okay, we're done. If you got across the river, you're lucky. And they blew the bridge behind them to make sure that the Ukrainians couldn't cross the Dnipro River. Just ask the train crew on the Kerch Bridge. Yeah, it takes a lot to collapse a bridge. It really does. That doesn't mean it doesn't make it very. It doesn't completely destroy it. And Charlton Brooks says that combine harvester drivers in Ukraine, so farmers in Ukraine, have to wear flak vests now. Yes, many of them wear flak vests. Some of them don't. It's not a requirement, but it's heavily encouraged, that's for sure. But it really depends on what they hit, if it will actually help them. And Ervis followed that up. I was wondering if flak vests have leg-long boot versions or a swimsuit version. Well, yes and no. So flak vests come in many different types, right? Like I have a flak vest. Mine, I don't have hard plates in it. I only have soft plates in it, which means they stop up to small caliber handgun rounds, because they're just Kevlar weave. And the thing about the vest is that there's actually hooks on the bottom of the vest where you can hook in. There's different things you can do. Some of these vests are actually, they have different designs for different things. Some of them, they go over the front like this, and it gives you a double set of protection right here in the center. Some of them, you can actually hook on, or they have built-in things to protect the groin. Because believe it or not, groin injuries are extremely dangerous. And it's not just because, man, that's not exactly as a dude where I want to get hit. It's because both of your femoral arteries converge into your pelvic area, and they run up and on the inside of your groin, which makes it extremely dangerous if there was to be shrapnel and stuff in there. It makes it very, very bad. Which is why you see in Afghanistan and in about middle of Iraq, 2004 and onward, when the IED threat really became prevalent in Iraq, where you see a lot of guys wearing those groin protectors on their flax to prevent those kinds of injuries, because that was the most likely where they would get hit. As for the swimsuit version. I actually do have. I do have still. I do not find them. They really hurt. I do not find them comfortable. I never have worn them outside of absolute necessity. They do make Kevlar underwear. So I have Kevlar boxers that I was issued before I deployed. They're nice and warm, but they really dig into you. They're not well made. They're made for the protection, but they're not made for anything else. Did not find them comfortable, really not practical, but they do make Kevlar underwear. So in a sense, yes, they do make swimsuit versions of Kevlar, yes. But it's very light. It's just to protect against small bits of shrapnel. That's it. An added layer of protection. Really, with explosives, there is a limited amount of what you can do, and it's very difficult to deal with because not always is the explosion itself or the shrapnel going to be what kills you. Similar to how with a missile or a rocket, you don't stand right behind where they shoot it. That's called the hot gases and everything that come out the back of that is called a backblast if it's a rocket. But that concussion, all those hot gases, that huge amount of air, displacement of air, all at an instant, milliseconds of time. And when an explosion goes off, it creates something called overpressure. And overpressure occurs. That is, like I said, where the air is getting rapidly pushed out of an area. Is the force of the blast, the concussion of the blast, and that quick displacement of everything in the general vicinity of it. And even if shrapnel doesn't kill you, one of the concerns for me, because they put when I was in Iraq, when I was in the embassy, they built these really fancy. They took a Kevlar weave plywood, essentially, a really thick, heavy wood. It's very impressive what they built. This really thick plexiglass, and they layered. There's like 400 pounds of sandbags that they had layered on top of the post, and sandwiched in between these ballistic panels. And I said, it's not airtight. And I said, well, if this thing takes a direct hit, and they're like, oh, you'll be fine. If this thing takes a direct hit, it won't kill you. But, the explosion definitely isn't going to get inside this thing. And I said, it doesn't matter if the explosion itself kills me and wipes this post off the face of the earth. Even if this post could be perfectly okay, but the overpressure from a Katyusha rocket hitting my post would have killed everyone inside the post. Because what it does is that's what causes you to bleed from the ears, is what causes you to bleed from different pores, your nose and your eyes and your ears and stuff. That's the overpressure. And that will kill you. That will 100% kill you. It's equally as dangerous. The overpressure is equally as dangerous as the explosion and the shrapnel. If you're close enough to it, it will seriously screw you up. And this is what causes a lot of traumatic brain injuries. And causes serious permanent damage to a lot of guys that survive large 500-pound IED explosions and stuff. The overpressure really screws these guys up, and there's nothing you can really do. So there's a lot of different dangers. It's not just the blast itself. There's other things that come with it. So you have to be cognizant of that. There's only so much you can prepare for. We're going to kind of ring back around and into Kherson at the end here. And we jump over here. This is in Keslivka, which was liberated.
28 бригада, Киселевка, Северада.
Флагшток старый, да?
Да.
За швабру похож.
А?
О, у вас красивый флаг.
Да, дуже.
And there's something with this that was brought to my attention, and I think is important to discuss. It's very good that these places are being liberated. We can all agree with that. It's very good. There's no justification for this war. That is correct. There's no way you can justify this war, regardless of the rhetoric, regardless of the means of the justification, no matter what you were saying. But something was brought to my attention about these videos, and I think it's important to talk about. And I think it's important to actually point these things out and be honest about it, instead of just saying, like, we pretending we don't notice. That is a signal. That patch right there is a crossed. These are crossed potato masher hand grenades. Nazi. This is a symbol from an SS battalion during World War II. This right here, it's SS. Okay? It's a Nazi SS symbol. Very well known. Okay? Look at the flag. It's the Iron Cross. It's not any that is the Iron Cross. There is no like other way to put that. That is the Iron Cross. Okay? That's a thing. And we see this from pretty much all the guys in this unit, and they all have this patch. Okay? It's very clear what has happened here. Okay? So it's very good that this place has been liberated. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea to do this. Satirical Gamer says, I just joined. What's your thoughts on the insignia being used by Ukrainian soldiers? That's what I'm getting ready to talk about. So, the cross potato masher hand grenades is actually a symbol of an SS battalion, a Nazi SS battalion. For those that don't know, the SS are the personal divisions of Adolf Hitler. They started as a paramilitary group within the Nazi Party, of Nazi Party sympathizers. They're considered stormtroopers, the stormtrooper divisions, and he joined them, and they're actually separate from the Wehrmacht, which is the standard regular German army. And that's their history, and all of them. That's the SS Lightning Bolts, which is very, very well known. The SS Lightning Bolts, and it is Nazi symbolism. It is Nazi symbolism. It's as much Nazi symbolism as it is as the swastika is now. Even though technically it was a Buddhist symbol before that, it is now, it has that connotation, right? And I don't believe it is correct to do this. Once again, this does not justify Russia invading Ukraine and massacring a people and committing genocide. Because, by definition, they are committing a genocide. Like, there is no justification for this war whatsoever. Like, you do not invade your neighbors for any reason in the modern day and age that has to deal with Nazism or anything like that. Okay? Like, that day and age is over. And we can see very clearly that that is not the point. You do not annex territories based off of, well, they were Nazis. That's not what you did. That you don't get to annex territories in the modern day and age. It's not how that works. Otherwise, the United States probably could have just annexed Iraq, and then it suddenly is all of our problem. But you do not use this symbolism. You don't use it, and if you're going to use it, you don't use it publicly. And the reason I say that caveat is because I do know people that weren't neo-Nazis. They weren't neo-Nazis. They weren't Nazis. They weren't anybody. But I do know people. It's very common for scout sniper platoons in the Marine Corps to use the SS Lightning Bolt. It's very common. Scout sniper, SS, they use the SS Lightning Bolt because it looks cool. Because it's kind of terrifying. And because what's a sniper's job? the sniper really only has one purpose in life, and that is to take life. So, but they don't. It's not an advertised thing. And some pictures exist out there. There's plenty of pictures. I pulled up when I was having this discussion with the staff member. I pulled this up earlier and showed it. And said like, hey, look, yeah, like this is a thing. And even myself, right? Even myself, I never used Nazi symbolism, but I do have a picture of me holding an Islamic State flag because we captured an Islamic State flag. So that is, but it's not something, you know, I don't post that stuff publicly. Like I've never posted it on social media. I never talk about it. This is the first time I've ever publicly talked about having that. Here, I'll even, there you go. Right? So, you know, and that's very, you know, that's, you know, like, that's not, generally speaking, that wouldn't look good, right? Or this wouldn't look good, right? See? SS Lightning Bolts. USMC Scout Snipers. We've killed more people than crack. Or this one. This is a very well-known photo. Battalion Landing Team 3-1, Scout Sniper Platoon. 3-6, still unable to find their rifles. There's their Scout Sniper Platoon, also probably having lost their rifles. Another one from Battalion Landing Team 3-1. So, I have never agreed with its usage in a public sense. I've never agreed with its usage. I don't think it's professional. I don't think it's correct. And I believe that even if you are a neo-Nazi, even if you are a white supremacist or anything, and that is something you should keep to yourself, right? Like, it's a personal thing. Keep it to yourself. And I have unfortunately known people that were like that, and they were professional enough to do that, and they didn't let it get in the way of anything, and they didn't say anything. But that is, you know, but that's the reality, and it's not a good, you know, it's just not a good image. If you're going to be liberating these cities, don't be doing it wearing SS battalion stuff. Even if it looks cool, even if it looks terrifying, even if they're calling you Nazis anyway, so might as well. It's not a good look. So I think it's important to talk about. I think it's important to bring up. I think it's important to see this stuff and not just look past it for any reason. Because, you know, I don't, you know, because as much as we do have a bias for Ukraine, right, we have to be honest about what we're seeing. And that you don't just sweep it under the rug. So I think that's important to talk about. And I think it's important to understand that it's not just them, and it's not just why. You know, it's not just them, but militaries, U.S. military even does it. So, and we have a couple questions. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't think it's professional. I don't think it's proper to do publicly. But privately, like, is a little thing inside your team or inside your platoon or whatever, I think that's okay, as long as you don't make it a public thing. Because it's unprofessional in the public light. How can Zelensky himself feel about seeing his own troops exhibiting Nazi symbols? Not really probably his biggest concern. The man runs a country of millions of people. Yes, is it important that this kind of symbolism is not very much public? Because it does hurt their rhetoric, right? It does hurt their image when this stuff gets out. And it gives Russians, I mean, will have a heyday with this. They will have a heyday with this. They really will on social media. And that's just the reality of how Russian trolls work. They will latch onto this, and this will never die for them. But that is, but it does not necessarily mean, that it's a, there's not everyone uses Nazi symbolism is what I'm getting at. Like it's not unrecoverable, but it definitely isn't a good light. It's not the worst thing though. And the military, I'm sure, now that this is very much public knowledge, the military, I'm sure, it will be cracking down on that because there are regulations against it. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on it, and that kind of answers everything I've seen. Bookham asked, Bookham 40 asked, I see they carry patches with blood types on their vest. Does the U.S. do that? Yes. Yes, we do. So this is my vest. This is my personal vest. This is not like a military issued one. This is just my personal one that I picked up. And as you can see, this is my flak patch. You can see, obviously, I have my corporal symbol. I got 2-7. You can see right there in the top that it says "Oh, pause." It also has my ZAP number on it. So ZAP number is what you call in when you give someone, when you're calling in that someone has been hit, wounded, or killed, that kind of thing, injured. So you give Papa Hotel, Papa Hotel 39600 is mine. But yes, so you put, and on my headband, or on my helmet, we carry these things. They're called cat eyes. And it's very common, and I do this too. It's very common that on these cat eyes, which is like a little band, and it has a couple of really small glow-in-the-dark things on the back. It makes it look like a cat eyes glowing in the dark, which is where they get their name. But it's so that you can be identified and seen at nighttime. They're not very bright. They're not very big, so it doesn't make you a huge target, but it so that you can visually be identified at nighttime, especially during training ranges. A lot of guys put on that band, they will write their blood type, their ZAP number, and all of that information on it, so that way they can read it. No, they did not let me keep my gear. That's my personal stuff. So anything I bought for myself or have for myself, I keep that. But they do not let you keep your SIF issue. The only certain things you get to keep. Usually very much more personal items, stuff that they don't really want back. Socks and that kind of thing. But so I do have that stuff. I don't have a helmet right now, so I don't have my cat eyes to show you, but I do write them on there. So yes, it's very common practice to do that. You also usually keep these little things. They're called kill cards, and you usually put them in like your shoulder pocket and in your leg pockets, so that way your arm, so that way they can pull that out, and it has like the serial numbers for your equipment, because you try and retain equipment from somebody who's been wounded or killed. So we call it ADL. Can you keep Kevlar underwear? Yes, they do not want your underwear back. I still have it. I just never wear it. There's no point in wearing it, and it's uncomfortable. But yes, so that's the thing. But yeah, so you keep kill cards, and it has all your information. It has all your EDL information, has all of your Zap number information, so they can call on your ZMIST and your 9 line if you get wounded or killed. And we got another question here. So yes, Americans do that too. And another thing we do is you keep a dog tag in your boot in case your leg's blown off. They can identify your leg or legs. Period. I might need them one day. Yes, that is true. I'm not out yet. I'm still technically in active reserve. No recycled underwear. No recycled underwear. Is there any estimates how many Russian troops have been left and abandoned behind Ukrainian lines? This is coming from Gerard Smulovich. Yes, I have heard several different numbers. Right now, the latest estimate I heard is that roughly 10,000 Russian troops, up to 10,000 Russian troops, were still on that side of the river. And that many had got rid of their uniforms and were walking around in civilian attire, or that they were just waiting to be found and so that way they could surrender. That is what I have heard. There has been little to no resistance from Russian forces at this point. And so there's just not a lot of information regarding that. There's just not going to be any accurate numbers. But there is some kind of a sustainable resistance from the Russians on this side of the river. It is done. This part of the war is done. Stanislav was liberated by Ukrainian troops.
Первый есть.
So Stanislav has been liberated. And keeping up with the theme of trophies and captured stuff, an Mi-8 helicopter was captured here in just outside Chernobivka at the Kherson International Airport.
Я не знаю, хто там віджимає танки, щось таке, но ми віджали вертольот. Перший батальйон, 28-ма бригада, вертольот.
Yeah, everyone thinks they're so cool because they captured a tank. These guys captured a helicopter. George Smolovich says, I'm thinking more of a logistic issue handling so many POWs. Yes, it is very difficult to handle large numbers of detainees. We didn't really have a large number of detainees, but it was something that you get trained for, but it's not something we necessarily extensively trains for. Now, we do learn a proper way to take detainees, because the possibility of having to do so in a combat zone is actually pretty significant. You actually take a lot of detainees, especially if you're going to go to Afghanistan, which was a huge possibility for us, and I had a lot of friends that went to Afghanistan, even though I didn't go myself. Rooster Sideburn says, "Get to the top." I'm sorry, I cannot do Arnold Schwarzenegger. But detainees are very difficult to handle, and a large influx of them. Ukraine was already stating that because of the Kharkiv counteroffensive and the successes of it, and the massive number of troops that had surrendered, it was very difficult for them to, that they're running out of room. They're actually building more locations at this point, but if there's that many POWs, it could be a huge problem for them because they don't have the facilities to actually house them, which then comes into, can you actually follow the Geneva Convention on the treatment of prisoners if you've run out of the ability to? Like, is it still considered a war crime, even if you make every effort possible, but you simply don't have the ability to? And that's one of the huge questions And I think if that is the case, and the Red Cross would have to be the ones to verify that is the case, it would not be a Ukrainian one. Ukraine cannot independently do that. They have to go by the Red Cross. On that, they would have to be the ones to verify if that was the case. But the number of POWs would be very, very difficult to handle in any capacity. I mean, 10,000 POWs is just astronomical. I mean, that's an entire division of troops. So I really don't know. But it would be a logistical nightmare. It would be a logistical nightmare if it was all at once. If it was continual, if it was just kind of gradual, continual, we caught 30 POWs today, we loaded them on a truck and sent them away, and then the next day they catch another 30 and send them back, it would become a logistical issue, but not for the front lines. It becomes a logistical issue for the guys that are way in the rear echelon guys. But for the Ukrainians there on the front lines and their actual supply lines and everything, it doesn't really become a logistical issue unless it's an en masse surrender, which then becomes an immediate difficulty. But really, those problems are going to be for the infrastructure deep inside of Ukraine, really out of Russian ground troop reach, and that's where we're going to see that issue. Bookham follows up with, how did Kherson fall so fast when the war started? And someone did reply. Richard Cyburns replied, some say treason, and there's a little bit of truth to that. If you remember, a couple months into the war, President Zelensky went and he fired a lot of people, that were in the heads of several different administrations and several people from this region, including the individual in charge of the Kherson Oblast, because of possible treason and collaboration with the Russians. It's a possibility. To what extent, we don't know, but it's a possibility. That being said, the war here, if you remember, right here, the battle for the Antonovsky Bridge, even though it lasted several days of multiple assaults by the Russians across the bridge, and it was very heavy fighting, especially at this intersection. I mean, tanks just blown to hell, anti-tank guns everywhere, dead and wounded up here on this ridge line in their foxholes and fighting positions, massive amounts of destroyed Russian vehicles on the Antonovsky Bridge and on the opposite side of the river. It was a bloodbath for both sides trying to cross this bridge. This was the point of contention. This right here was the make or break. But at the beginning of the war, Ukraine, moderately prepared, much better than they were, say, in 2014, still they were struggling. They hadn't mobilized yet. There was a lot of confusion. It's a very difficult time. And they have to rush a lot of equipment, and a lot of this hasn't been pulled yet, and basically anyone that's already there is what they're going to have for really a good month and a half, and that's the support they're going to get. And if you remember, it was such a rush that they were handing out rifles to anyone that would take them. They were literally pulling trucks out in Kyiv and throwing AKs down and saying, "Here, you want to fight? Grab an AK." Like, everyone, you get an AK, you get an AK, you get an AK. They were literally passing them out because they needed bodies and they needed people, because the possibility was that they were going to become overrun and they were going to have to fight a guerrilla war. So Ukraine just, at the beginning of the war, just wasn't prepared. And even then they held out a lot of hope that it just wouldn't happen. But they just were not prepared for that major assault, and that really plays a lot into it. It's just the suddenness of it, the inability to muster troops fast enough, not being prepared initially for that kind of a fight. And they did make a good choice. They didn't make a stand here. They didn't make the huge stand here. They made the stand at the river, which was the smarter decision, and it bought valuable time, because by the time the Russians do cross the river, and they do take Kherson and they start pushing northward, they have a massive amount of troops that have now concentrated over here, over by Novakovka, and you also have a massive amount of troops that have concentrated up here by Mykolaiv on the Ukrainian side, and the Russians start pushing towards Mykolaiv, and they get stopped outside the city, and they get stalled, over here on their flank, and now they have just this little area, and it stayed like that until the day. So they were pushed back gradually, but they got stopped there, and it really minimized, and it really put Ukraine into a really good tactical situation to allow for a victory like this. It would have been a lot easier if they didn't lose it in the first place, but it was, it definitely, this was a situation that was manageable, and it was easily manageable once that initial momentum had been stopped. Once that initial gains were stopped, that is where that's where they were able to start reacting, start actually shaping the battle space, and eventually pushing to this point. So it sucks that it happened. Yes, there probably is some stuff that was happening behind the scenes that we don't know about very clearly, that probably wasn't in the best of terms for several individuals in the government per se. But the Ukrainians did not give up the battle of Kherson lightly, and they definitely suffered very early in the war. They suffered very heavy casualties, and they fought very vigorously and very brutally to keep Kherson. And unfortunately, the Russians had the momentum, they had the supplies, they had the troops, and those were the best troops at the time. They were actually the best Russian troops. So it definitely means, so it definitely was a very good, good stand. But they unfortunately just didn't have the troops, didn't have the supplies, didn't have the capabilities to truly hold off a Russian offensive forever. And time was not their ally. So that's the reality of what happened so fast at the beginning of the war. And I wouldn't say it's just so fast. Several day engagements last usually under an hour. They fought for several days. That was not a short battle for the Ukrainians. It was definitely shorter for the comparison than the rest of the war, but it was no short battle, to say the least. And we see here, of course, to finish off the Kherson Oblast, Kherson is liberated. Kherson is not declared officially liberated in name. It's liberated. We're calling it. It's been liberated. The majority of forces are not inside the city, according to President Zelensky. He said that there are special units that have entered the city, but the majority of forces are on the outskirts right now. But the Russians are gone, and there is no resistance. What was feared did not come to terms, which was good that everyone was prepared for the worst, because we thought that a trap had been laid. But it didn't. It was the Russians just did pull out, and it has been exuberant. I mean, I've never seen a happier group of people in my life as what I have seen today. It makes you want to cry. You have tears of joy. I mean, these people are so happy. It's very emotional. The partisans who have fought very, very bitterly against the Russians in these occupied areas, they were the first ones to hoist the flags. They hoisted the flags over Kherson before Ukrainian troops reached the city. Partisan fighters went on top of the buildings and they raised the Ukrainian flag all over town before the Ukrainian troops arrived in Kherson to already find that flags had been hoisted, and a huge reception. So these are Ukrainian troops as they have entered Kherson. This is right down in the center. This is Freedom Square, right there in the center of Kherson, right outside the administration's building.
142-й центр прилітає з Херсона!
Да,
не тільки навчаємо, а ще й працюємо.
Notice that man carrying a watermelon. The famous Kherson watermelon.
Героям слава! Смерть ворогам! Понад усе! Понад усе! Понад усе!
Now this right here is a babushka. I want to shake this lady's hand.
Сідай ззаді і зажити. Ура! Мама, рвати, сюди вже руля. Поперла, не що ти. Сідай ззаді.
Once again, it's been a very emotional day for them. I mean, this is a welcoming of a lifetime right here. And they have been continually celebrating, and you can see today's thumbnail there. They have the European Union and the Ukrainian flags there, and you can see the Ukrainian flag flying over. That was the flag that was raised by partisans this morning. Once they had noticed that all Russian forces had left, they put all this up, and the partisans actually went on top of the administration's building and raise the Ukrainian flag well before Ukrainian troops even arrived in the city. And they are partying.
Це буде Україна! Слава!
Ебануться, ты снимаешь, нет?
Стоп, дальше, не можна тут зупинятися. Тут треба зупинятися, тут треба прапор.
I mean, it's just been a hell of a day. I mean, they were bogged down, as you can see. Like, they were getting bogged down by people that they are so happy to see them. It's think of the Netherlands, like Holland during World War II, when Allied troops were literally, it became dangerous for them. Going through towns and cities because everyone came out and rushed and hugged and kissed them and everything else. So they were so happy to see the Allies come in and liberate their town that it actually became dangerous for them. Like that's the same type of reaction that we're seeing here. These people are so happy, so happy to be finally liberated, no longer be under Russian occupation. I mean, they're stalling military convoys.
Наверное, выходим.
Все, ви контролюєте. Контролируй, чердаки.
А ну дай хоть помолчи.
Лена! Лена!
And the thing is that the party goes on well into the night tonight, as Ukrainians are celebrating very long and into the night, being liberated and singing songs that have been banned and by the Russians under occupation, and just celebrating their victory all around. I also apologize. My cat is going insane in the background. But yes. So it's been awesome, and we're seeing just all sorts of celebrations going long and into the night tonight. It's, yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic day. I don't know what else to say for Ukraine. Today is a day of celebration. I think it's a crime that they cut off that video right before the end of the song, because you don't usually do that to a national anthem. Of course, the watermelon. And our understanding is that Ukrainian troops were striking at Russian convoys as they were leaving, so inflicting maximum damage. But yes, it continues. I mean, all through the night tonight, it just continues.
Це Херсон, центральна площа. Там видно нічого, Ніколаєш. Підсвітіть, будь ласка. Ми це зробили. Це підрозділ Курта, блядь! Уху!
So there you go. See if I missed any here. There's a lot of them. Oh, here we go. You can hear them there. They're saying Red Viburnum in the meadow. So, an awesome day. It has been an awesome day for Kherson. It has been very, very, very happy to see such a liberation occur. And today is a day to celebrate here in the Kherson region. There is a lot to celebrate. Doesn't mean that in other parts of the country there isn't still death and devastation, and we're getting ready to get into a little bit of that as we move to the end of the Ukraine segment. But it definitely is a day of celebration overall, and it's awesome to see. It's awesome to see how happy these people are. It's a very emotional thing, and I can't imagine what these people have had to go through. I mean, we've seen what happens under occupation. We've seen what the remnants of it already, and I'm sure it's happened here. But that is for the future to be uncovered and to go through those painful memories. Today is a day to rejoice and to celebrate regarding what has happened there. And what does this mean in the big picture? It means that realistically, the Russians going across the Dnipro River again, they have ensured it themselves that is not physically possible for either them or the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians probably really don't need to. The Ukrainians can just use a minimal amount of forces at this point. They can hold down the Dnipro River to make sure there aren't any major incursions by Russian forces. And they can transfer to those tens of thousands of troops, which have been here in this oblast, which have been fighting for months on end to make this victory happen. They can now be brought out. They can get some rest. They can refit. They can relax a little bit, and they can regroup. Get replacement troops in as needed, as we know that the training is wrapping up for the United Kingdom. For the troops that were there in the United Kingdom, and they're getting rotated back here into Ukraine. So we do know that's coming. They'll definitely boost those numbers too, and be able to form their own battalions. And these guys can get a little bit of break before they get reconcentrated and sent back onto the line over here into, say, the Donetsk Oblast, which is probably where we're going to see a major offensive next, or we're going to see a lot of fighting next. I think is in the Donetsk and the Luhansk. That's where the most brutal fighting is ongoing right now. That's where they need the most troops, and I think that's really probably what they're looking at is this is where it needs to happen, because the Russians can't do anything here either, and that leaves them just this section across the Dnipro River, across the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, Donetsk, and Luhansk region. And as the Russians are squeezed, as they're squeezed in to these regions to where this fighting is ongoing, and as more and more territory is taken, generally speaking, it becomes more and more difficult to actually take, to actually liberate, because it's a lot as you are liberating areas. That means that the Russian forces, while beaten and demoralized, it can make it very difficult to fight them and go through it. It can make it especially bloody towards the end, because there's a lot less area that they don't have to worry about, Kherson and Luhansk and Donetsk and Zaporizhia. Now they just have to worry about the latter three. They don't have to worry about the Kharkiv Oblast. They've lost it. Now they just have to worry about, the Luhansk. And it makes it where troop concentrations are tighter. So it's a give and a take as a war drags on, and you see that in many cases throughout history, where the end of the war really becomes the bloodiest. The Japanese, for instance, on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, especially bloody and brutal campaigns. They're right there at the end of the war, where the Japanese really didn't have anything, but they really didn't have a whole lot left to lose. And the Russians are quickly being pushed into that too. But they are demoralized. They're beaten once again, and it's fantastic. But that's what we're going to see is a shift. And there's a possibility that people are saying next stop Mariupol. A lot of talk about Mariupol. Mariupol would be a big one too, and I don't know if that is going to be the point. Mariupol, realistically, we really don't see a lot of action on this section of the front lines. Whenever you see points here, usually speaking, except for the last couple of weeks where we've seen a little bit more activity here along this section of the line, generally speaking, we don't really see a lot of action here. It's very quiet in this sector of the southern front, in the Zaporizhia Oblast. Most of the fighting is ongoing here. I mean, this is right here is where the fighting is happening. Everything up from Volodar up and clear up to the Russian border is where the fighting has been happening. This is very quiet, static, not really either side doing anything other than shooting artillery at each other. So it's very possible that troop concentrations could be pushed here and then break through to make that push to Mariupol that they were thinking about before the fall of Mariupol, that we could see them pushing to liberate and split the Russian defenses. Or they could be looking to close the door, which is where they push here in the north out of the Kharkiv Oblast and literally kind of roll them in. So you cut off the Russian supply lines through mainland Russia here, and you retake the Luhansk and the Donetsk Oblast, and you kind of literally, we call it closing the door, swinging the door closed here on them here. So that way it bottlenecks them to this one point here in the Kerch Strait to come up and through the south for resupply. And it makes it very difficult for them to cover, especially now you're talking about HIMARS can be set up here along the bank of the Dnieper River and hit targets in Crimea. So that makes it very difficult for them to really do anything. And I think that's the Russians are anticipating losing additional ground once again, as we see that they are setting up defensive lines and they're bringing in heavy equipment to do it, and actual construction crews and stuff. And they're doing it very well ahead of any possibility of a major loss for these positions. So, or a major expectation to be using them. They're doing it well ahead of time. So I think the Russians are really anticipating probably not being able to hold on for much longer. And they realize that their tactical situation on the ground, their strategic situations on the ground just are not viable in a major sense in the word right now. So Gerard Smolovich says, does winter benefit defenders? Winter benefits nobody. Winter sucks to fight in. It is... I mean, I can imagine how cold Ukraine gets. I mean, I know how cold Syria gets, and that sucked a lot. It makes it very difficult to fight, because winter, regardless of how high your morale is, life sucks in the wintertime. It's cold. It's miserable. You're wet all the time. It's muddy if you're in Ukraine, because it's Razbatitsa. No one enjoys it. You're constantly getting sick I mean, sickness and disease, and that wet conditions, especially in the static trenches. The winter time is where you get the worst conditions for trench life. 100% is the winter and into the spring, where it becomes just this boggy, muddy, wet mess, and it's really cold, so guys are getting hypothermia. And then in the springtime, when all of that snow melts and it just fills the trenches with water, makes it absolutely miserable. It's one of the reasons why the Somme was terrible. On top of the fact that it had just been blasted to hell, the Somme was a springtime offensive, and it made it very difficult for them because of those conditions. So it really benefits nobody, but it will slow the Russian ability to resupply. But it will also slow Ukraine. The thing is that the winter really, what it does is it benefits nobody, but it doesn't really help anybody either. Or it doesn't benefit, but it doesn't hinder anybody. It does it both equally for them. The Ukrainians already have an advantageous as the defensive party in many places, but they're also on the offensive in places too, which is where you're going to see significant casualty rate increases, which is what we have seen. Well, we've seen significant casualty rate increases from the Kharkiv and the Kherson Oblast because of the counteroffensives. That's just how war works, unfortunately. But this would time in the winter, especially during Razbatitsa season, and in that short period where the ground is permafrost, you're going to see some more kinetic action actually taking place once the ground freezes over. But in the meantime, as this Razbatitsa mud gets worse and really covers the entire country in it, and also during the springtime again, it's going to be very difficult for either side to maneuver anywhere other than roadways, which is bottleneck points. So you're really going to see them dig into probably the static defensive lines. You're not going to see, I wouldn't say no kinetic action, but I would expect, not to say that Ukraine hasn't surprised us so far, considering everything that they have done, but I would expect to see less kinetic action on both sides, and using that time to resupply and prepare their forces and reconcentrate forces, and really preparing, using that time to keep pressure on the enemy but not really make any significant gains, and really preparing to make those significant offensives once the ground hardens again in the springtime after the spring Razbatitsa, and just really holding the line and building up your own forces and your own capabilities in the meantime. I think that's where this war is going to be headed into the winter. And I think they're trying to get as much done and shape the battlefield as much as possible before the winter really sets in, to allow them to do that, which is why the major offensives have come now. During, you see the major offensive in the Kherson Oblast now, which is wrapping up right as the Razbatitsa is starting to hit in the Kherson area. And you also saw the Kharkiv counteroffensive in July, which is really the last period of time. This is it before the winter sets in. And they're really trying to push as much as they can to liberate as much as they can, shape the battlefield as much as possible before both sides get bogged down into this muddy, just miserable mess that is going to be the winter. So I think that's really where it's going to go. It really doesn't benefit either side, but it also doesn't hinder them more than the other either. So it's just going to be terribly difficult for all of them. It's just going to be terribly difficult for all of them, no matter who you are, Russian or Ukrainian. But the Russians, generally speaking, are going to suck more because, as someone pointed out, I would guess that Ukraine has better cold weather gear than the Russians. That is very much true. The Russians have no idea where their cold weather gear is. That's part of the problem. So that's definitely an issue for them. But as we leave the Kherson Oblast and all of the uplifting stories that have come with it, we reach Mykolaiv. And unfortunately, while the overtones of today have been for the Kherson Oblast, the Mykolaiv Oblast has suffered in its stead. And while we have covered some of the liberated villages that happened very early this morning and late yesterday, Mykolaiv itself was hit again with long-range missiles, believed to be S-300 missiles, actually. As we've talked about before, S-300s are a SAM system, surface-to-air missile system, but some of their missiles were converted to hit surface targets. They're not accurate whatsoever, but they do carry a big punch. And it struck apartment buildings and residential buildings throughout the city of Mykolaiv. A young 16-year-old boy was made an orphan after both of his parents were killed in a blast, with a total of 7 civilians having been killed and at least 12 others injured in the shelling. So it did completely collapse. The work is still ongoing to sift through the rubble. But that is Roman. But once again, both his parents were killed in the blast. His grandmother is now looking after him. She also lived there. This is coming from Amin Dezhapar, who is a member of the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament. And we'll see this from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Muted myself once again. This time it was my fault, not a technical error. So I see a comment came in that says that this is when drones come into their own. As we're wrapping up the Ukrainian segment. And the drones, yes and no. The drones are very effective at clearing out trenches. But they are also not a fix-all. Unfortunately, to clear trenches, drones don't take and hold ground. Trenches have to be cleared and they have to be taken, and that has to be done by infantrymen. So it's difficult. Yes, they will inflict casualties, and we've seen them do a lot of that. To the point that you can go to Sign My Rocket and get one done for you. And they will keep redoing it until they get the Russians with it. So, but the drones, once again, they're not a fix-all. And that goes for any tool in the battlefield. They are, whether you're talking tanks or infantry or aircraft or drones or anything else, it's a tool. It's made for specific jobs. Some of them are adapted to do different jobs, like you see them being used now. But munitions are limited, and people able to actually make the drones that can drop hand grenades are limited. And there's only a certain amount of them. And the testament to that is the amount of artillery being used by both sides, and the massive, massive fields of just shell craters. It looks like World War I all over again. And it's not just the Russians that are doing that. The Ukrainians are too. I mean, they use massive amounts of BM-21 grads. They use massive amounts of M777s, whatever they have on hand, the HIMARS, the Uragans that they have captured, the 2S1s, the 2S3s that they are using, the Mistas that they have used, or that they have been using after they've captured them. You know, all sorts of stuff, Caesars, all sorts of things that they have, you know, that they're employing. They're using a massive amount of artillery too. And as it goes into that static warfare, you're going to continue to see that. And drones are going to play a lot more of a role as an observer, a forward observer, as they have been playing for that artillery strikes, for that artillery work, I think. It's not a job that it likes to get talked about nearly as much because you don't get to see them dropping hand grenades and killing Russians with it. But it is a job that is what the majority of drones are being used for. Reconnaissance, forward observing, route recon, that kind of thing. So as cool as it is to watch those hand grenades, it is widespread use in that fashion. But it's not necessarily as many as you think, I think, is how that works out. There's a lot of them, but it's usually small groups of specialized units that are doing that. It's not as widespread. So we're going to see a lot of artillery fire, I think, and a lot of trench digging, and a lot of people getting really cold, really sick, I think, over the next few months. But we've also seen how really cool the dugouts are for Ukrainians, and I'm really excited to see what they do with all that time and static defenses with nothing but time on their hands of what they make in their trenches. That's going to be cool. That's going to be cool. Some of those trench positions should be preserved as a testament to how Ukrainians can literally make life awesome while sitting at a trench line. Want to make pizza while you're under constant shelling? You can do that. I mean, the Ukrainians can. Want to have a sauna too? Screw it. One fire for both things. Go ahead. The Ukrainians, you want to watch TV? Sure thing. They definitely have that set up. Make sure the cats can get in too. I mean, they do some crazy stuff with their trenches, and some of that stuff should be preserved. William Young says many of those transpositions are better than where I lived in college. As you know, that the artillery squad for the USSR was stationed in Ukraine outside Kharkiv. It has a history going back nearly 109 years. I did not know that, but I do know. But I did know that the T-34 tank production was out of Kharkiv. So I do know that T-34s were primarily, while it was initially designed by a Russian man, it was primarily a Ukrainian tank manufacturer who produced the majority of the T-34s that actually won World War II for the Soviets. After they actually got tanks, and not just the BT tank series and the T-26s, which were immediately knocked out of action during Operation Barbarossa with everything else, or it didn't immediately get taken by the Finns during the Winter War. But that's for a different time. But yes, I did not know the artillery school. I did not know the artillery school one, though. So that's pretty cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm always interested in learning stuff like that. But with that, we get ready to move into the international news. There's been a fair bit amount of it. And we're going to start off, of course, with Russia. And we come over here, and we're actually going to skip Moscow. I'll come back to that. Where partisans are at work once again. Partisan group this time in Bashkortostan. Actually they went through and they lit a recruitment office on fire, as we've seen many times at this point. BOAK. We will continue to see them, I'm sure. But Russia is not taking things very well. This was not in the script for the Russians. A Russian propagandist lost it. He sided with Prigozhin. So, for those that don't know who Prigozhin is, if you may be new to the channel, he is... Oh, man. Prigozhin is Putin's chef. He is nicknamed Putin's chef because he was awarded very nice contracts for catering Putin's personal parties and government parties and the military and stuff like that. He's also the founder of the Wagner Group, which is the Russian private military corporation that's fighting in Ukraine, as well as operating elsewhere in the world, including Syria, Mali, and several other countries in Africa, and other clandestine operations, I'm sure, elsewhere, such as probably Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he accused the army of lying and stealing. Oh, I gotta see this. This guy is like the huge... He like is the host of Russia 1. This man is the lead propagandist for the Russians. I mean, we see him all the time, and he's finally lost it. He kind of lost it during the Kharkiv counteroffensive too. So you can see that he's just starting to crack, I think, at this point.
Много сволочей врали. Снизу доверху врали. О том, что у них на складах, о том, какие в техническом состоянии содержится техника, о том, сколько бойцов на линии фронта. И ни одного расстрелянного нет. Ни одного гаденыша за ухо не взяли. Ни один с собой не покончил. Ни один даже рапорт не написал. Много сволочей врали.
Yeah, he's not happy. That's not something we normally see him saying. That's very unusual for him. He's usually very passionate about, it's going all according to plan. That is the guy who says that. It's all going according to plan. Yeah, no. Even Dugin, who, if you remember, his daughter was, went splat inside of her car. He's disappointed by the retreat, and Dugin accused Putin of failure, saying that if the Tsar cannot save the people, then he will face the King of the Rain's fate, which is a man whose stomach was ritually torn open by his fellow tribesmen. And this is coming from Dugin. He says, Kherson is surrendered. A Russian city was surrendered. The capital of one of the regions of Russia, the same as Belgorod, Kursk, Donetsk, or Simferopol. If you don't care, then you are not Russian. Russians are now clenching their teeth in pain, weeping and suffering, as if their hearts were torn out. Their children, brothers, mothers, and wives were killed in the front of their eyes. If you aren't hurting now, you're nothing. Authorities, though they are responsible for this. What is the meaning of autocracy, which is what we have? We give the ruler absolute fullness of power, and he is saving us all, people, state, people, citizens, at a critical moment. If he surrounds himself with shit or spits on social justice, this is unpleasant, but at least he is saving us. What if he isn't? Then the fate of the King of the Rains, read Fraser. Autocracy also has a downside. Completeness of power in cases of success, but also completeness of responsibility for failure. You thought otherwise? How to get out of a situation? Immediately move from a sovereign to a commissar dictatorship, that is, introduce an ideology. The ruler almost did, but again, almost. And Kherson was surrendered, not almost. It was completely surrendered. No issues with Surovikin. He's not a politician. He was responsible for the technical side of the front. The strike is not a him. You know whom. And no PR will save here anymore. It is a critical situation. Political technologies do not work at all. History speaks today is utterly terrible for us. Words. This is not a betrayal. This is a step backwards. This is a step towards Armageddon. The conditions of the winning West, the civilization of Satan, will never be acceptable for Moscow. This means that tactical nuclear weapons and strategic nuclear weapons will remain. That is the end. And here is the most important thing. Under the pressure of circumstances, it is very bad that this is so. It is terrible that this is so. We made a number of military political corrections in the management of the special military operation. Why is it so late is a separate question. But it hasn't worked so far. The last resource is ideology, the real one, not the fake one. That is that the presidential administration, scared to death by the uprising of reality, is trying to sell. Stop playing around. Russian idea. Only that. It is foolish to go for the total destruction of mankind only because of the fear of the Russian idea, of our ideology. There's no other way. Authorities in Russia can't surrender anything else. The limit has been reached. But there are not enough purely technical means for victory. The war must become a people's war in full measure. But the state should become popular Russian too. Not like it is now. That is coming from Dugin. So yes, and Demise FPS says, yeah, he's going to be pushed out a window. Yeah, he is going to probably be pushed out of a window. Or commit suicide, or Lord knows what else. And move over here into Poland, where, if you are from Poland, happy Independence Day. Today is the Independence Day of Poland. It is celebrated here on November the 11th. To commemorate the anniversary of the restoration of Poland's sovereignty as the Second Polish Republic in 1918 from the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Russian empires. Tens of thousands in Warsaw marched peacefully Friday in a yearly Independence Day march organized by Polish nationalist groups that included anti-Ukrainian and anti-European Union slogans. The march is controversial because it's led by far-right groups and has included violence and white nationalists in the past years. But many people, including some with young children, also marched, seeing that the event is a way to show patriotism. Many people carried Poland's white and red flag. A few held banners, the far-right national radical camp depicting the Falanga, a far-right symbol dating to the 1930s, and stylized hand with a sword. So, happy Independence Day there, Poland. I'm happy to see that you guys are celebrating. Come over here to Brussels, where a man kills a police officer and injures another. The man attacked the police in Brussels. One law enforcement officer was killed and another was injured. The attacker was shot and taken to the hospital. Earlier in the day, the suspect, who was in his early 30s, visited a police station in the Schaerbeek area of northern Brussels, making incoherent remarks and talking about his hatred of the police. He was escorted to a psychiatric unit for treatment, but when the police contacted the hospital later, he had apparently already left. And in Vienna, much to my dismay, environmental activists glued themselves to a fossil. Now, they didn't actually glue themselves to the fossil, but rather the plinth to it, or the actual stand upon which it sits, at the Natural History Museum of Vienna. So they protested against the usage of fossil fuels.
Die haben wir da angeklebt, weil unsere Regierung uns mitten in diese Zukunft hineinführt. Und ich will nicht, dass meine Tochter so endet wie diese Dinosaurier. Wir sind Menschen, wir sind intelligent, wir haben eine Wahl. Der Antonio Guterres hat gesagt, wir haben die Wahl, kollektive Handlung oder kollektive Selbstmord. Wir müssen handeln, und zwar jetzt.
I've yet to see one good, like, proper protest. It's been mashed potatoes and tomato soup and gluing yourselves to paintings and fossils and I see why they're doing it in Europe, because if they did it in the United States, the security guard would have given them one real good ass kicking. Like, if I was the security guard at the Mercedes Benz, or like at the Mercedes place or the whatever place that they were spray painting in downtown London, like, oh yeah, I would have laid her out, like, no problem. It's like my job, you know? Like I don't, like, I get the point, and it does, and there is a point to it, right? Like there's a good message behind it. But the actions should not, like, the Unabomber, right? Like the Unabomber, right? Like he liked trees and the environment and everything, right? Like that was his whole point in doing all of that. He thought tech companies were behind the destruction of the environment. And what ended up happening? Like, it doesn't matter what his message was. He was also just known as the Unabomber because he used bombs and he filled them with twigs and stuff. Like, that was his whole ideology. Similarly, yeah, you just discredit the message. Like there's no, like, even if your message is good, like if you have poor execution, like that, like good initiative, bad judgment, you know, like good initiative, save the environment. Fossil fuel usage is bad. It ruins the environment. Oil, not good. Yes, every country understands this. I don't think there's anyone in the world who understands this. I don't think Europe is the source of the problem. However, Europe's the leading member of the world pushing renewable resources. They are leading the rest of the planet in that category. All of Europe, the entirety of the continent of Europe is leading that charge. You know who's not? China. China is not leading that charge. China has just increased the amount of coal burning power plants it has. So, you know, so it really discredits the message, and it's not entirely accurate, but it's just, it makes you look crazy. It doesn't make you look intelligent, even if what you have to say is good. So please stop doing this. I don't understand. Like, do you care about a painting more than my message? Well, you threw mashed potatoes at it, so yeah, I do. So that's the whole kicker on that. We jump down here and into the Middle East, and we end up in Al-Qatif, which is here in Saudi Arabia. Thousands are protesting after teenagers have been sentenced to death. Human rights activists have warned that 8 teenagers from Saudi Arabia's Shia-populated Qatif region in the eastern province will soon be executed, as the House of Saud is adamantly pressing ahead with a heavy-handed crackdown led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman against dissidents and anti-regime activists. The activists pointed out that the General Prosecutor's Office has sentenced Manasif and at least 5 others, including a teenager named Shajad al-Yazin, to death for apostasy. abandoning their Muslim faith, according to trial documents. In the city of Al-Khatif, in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, thousands of people took to the streets shouting, "Death to the Al-Assads." So it's important to some of this stuff is very important to talk about, to actually break down what they're saying. So for those that don't know, so it's the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and it's led by the King of Saudi Arabia and the Crown Princes. There's a lot of them. There are a lot of them. So Saudi Arabia is a very interesting country. They similar to Iran, they believe in Sharia law. The difference between them is they're different sectors of Islam. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is primarily Sunni. They are primarily Sunni Muslims. The Kingdom of, or the theocracy, the Republic of Iran, it's a theocracy. They have a supreme leader that's a religious head, and but they are Shia. Okay, the individuals being charged are Shia primarily, and have talked bad about the government, but primarily they have given up their faith. Their apostasy is what they said. Abandoning their Muslim faith, meaning they no longer consider themselves Muslim, which is the crime that is putting them to death under Sharia law. So that is the reason behind it. They were Shia, so not the version of Islam Saudi Arabia supports, and some of them had given up their Muslim faith. Also, not okay in a religiously driven kingdom, autocracy. So that is Saudi Arabia, and in Saudi Arabia, you actually, like, if you are a woman in Saudi Arabia, you must have your head covered. You must, you cannot drive. You must be escorted. Very similar to how Iran runs things. Very similar, but they are opposing religious ideologies within the same religion. Think of it like Protestants versus Catholics, like that kind of similar thing, except for in Islam. So that's really what's happening, and that is why these two countries are head to head and everything. That's why Saudi Arabia is in Yemen, aside from the fact that it's on their border, while Iran is supporting the rebels in Yemen that are fighting the Saudis. They are shipping weapons to them, which is why the United States is intercepting the shipments of weapons because of the UN arms embargo on them. So that's really where this gets in. And then you see that in Iraq, because it's Saudi Arabia supports the Americans in here, right? And Iran, so Saudi Arabia supports the fact that there's a coalition there. Iran does not, and they back Muqtada al-Sadr, who's constantly trying to overthrow the government with a large Shia population. He's a Shia cleric. And he also runs the Mahdi army. Iran also supports Shia-dominated popular mobilization forces in Iraq, like Kataib Hezbollah. So it's very much not just political, but religious in line on why there's so much conflict. And that is, these two countries, despite their vast similarities, because of their religious differences, are are very much constantly causing destabilization within the region. And yeah, just because I went to Saudi Arabia does not necessarily mean I agree with Saudi Arabia. It means I had orders. We go into Pakistan, where a TTP, or Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, field commander was killed during a counterterrorism operation. During counterterrorism operations, Special Services eliminated one of the most wanted field commanders, the TTP, and his assistant. The operation took place on the night of November the 9th through the 10th in the city of Dera Ismail Khan. During the arrest, the terrorists resisted and were neutralized on the spot. At the scene of the shootout, law enforcement agencies seized weapons, communications equipment, and IEDs. According to security forces, the field commander was involved in organizing attacks on the military and police throughout in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Looks like they put a bullet hole right through the gas tank of his motorcycle. Look at that HME. So that's an IED. And what that is it's a homemade explosive. A homemade explosive is usually made up of a base of ammonium nitrate, which is an extremely explosive fertilizer, or another type of extremely reactive chemical compound, usually a fertilizer of some type that has an explosive reaction because you can get your hands on it. And then they mix it with other agents which improve its basically it improves its lethality. They usually fill it with some shrapnel, and then they hook it to either it's either a control detonated or it's a victim operated system. There's different types. This is probably going to go into the ground, meaning it could be a command det, which would be like they have a cell phone and they hook it up to an electrical charge that would send up that if they call it with their cell phone or they send a text, it sends an electrical signal to the detonate, and it causes it to detonate. But the most common ones for something that you'd bury in the ground is something like pressure plates, pressure plate IEDs. A very simple circuit. There's two main types of pressure plates. You have pressure plate, or you have pressure on and pressure off. These are victim operated, meaning that the individual who is injured or killed by it ends up stepping on it or driving over it. And they pressure on means as soon as you hit that IED, it detonates. The other one is you hit the pressure plate, and then once you release the pressure on that, it then detonates after you've released that pressure onto the pressure plate itself. Some other ones are tripwires and other things, but that's not nearly as common. But yeah, it's homemade explosive, HME, generally speaking. Afghanistan has so many IEDs that they are literally paving roads over them because they are so old that they won't go off anymore. And this is right here on the border, right over the border from Afghanistan. This is kind of in the tribal regions of Afghanistan. More of the tribal regions are up here, but you're seeing a lot of this is where there's kind of a cross section between the two Talibans. Even though they're not the same, they do talk and they do learn from each other, and they do deal with each other in military capacity in a lot of ways. Coming over here into Indonesia, where President Biden from the United States is meant to meet with Xi Jinping, who is the leader of China, Communist China, at the G20 summit amid strained relations. President Biden will meet Xi Jinping in the People's Republic of China in Bali, Indonesia, on November the 14th. The leaders will discuss efforts to maintain and deepen lines of communication between the United States and the People's Republic of China, responsibly manage competition, and work together where their interests align, especially in transnational challenges that affect the international community. Two leaders will also discuss a range of regional global issues, and that's coming from a White House press briefing that they said that they will be meeting. And Biden will also, and according to Reuters, Biden will tell Xi that if North Korea continues on its current path, it will lead to an enhanced U.S. military presence in the region. And that's coming from the White House National Secretary Advisor Jake Sullivan, who told reporters of that aboard Air Force One as Biden flew to Cambodia. So, which is true. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's possible. The 7th Fleet has quite a lot of resources out there. And it's very possible that they will end up putting more military pressure in the Sea of Japan and the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea and South China Sea if that continues. Jump over down here into Cabo Delgado province of Mozambique, and we're seeing that the Islamic State is still very, very much active in this region. Resources of the Islamic State's published new photos of the aftermath of an attack on the barracks of the Mozambique army, which took place in the settlement of Chai in the province of Cabo Delgado. During the attack, one soldier was killed, and the rest managed to escape, and the jihadists, having done their job, returned to their initial positions. See them launching a small mortar there. So that's coming from the Islamic State. There is more, but it is too graphic to be showed on here. So if you are interested in seeing that and are of age, I recommend you're of age, then you can go and check it out on our website by clicking on the map. Over here in Washington, D.C., a new aid package was released and announced. It's $400 million of another drawdown from the U.S. Department of Defense. And we see that the package does include missiles for the Hawk, and Stinger missiles, additional munitions for the HIMARS, among others. And we do actually have that press release here. He said missiles for the Hawk air defense systems, which they are providing, 4 Avenger air defense systems. If I'm not mistaken, that's a Humvee with a shit ton of Stingers on it. Avenger air defense system. Yes it is. Okay, cool. I'm really happy I remembered that, because I have not thought about that in a long time. So this is kind of cool if you guys have never seen one of these. So right off Wikipedia here. So this is the Avenger. It's a Humvee. And it has a turret on the back, and it's basically like a Stinger. Yeah, it has 4 Stinger missiles. It's a mobile air defense system platform, which is really, really cool. Now, I have never seen one of these in person, ever. I've never seen them used. The Marine Corps does have, what is it, LAD? LAD gunners? Marine Corps says LAD, right? I thought they were in your schoolhouse. Anyway, they have LAD gunners. Light air defense. Anyway, and what they do is these are a little bit outdated from my understanding, but they're basically multi-launch Stinger missile systems. And it's on the back of a Humvee, so it's easily portable. I've, once again, never seen one in person. I've never been with LAD gunners to tell you about this, but it's kind of cool that they'd be sending them. I mean, they're going to serve a good purpose over there anyway. Additional ammunition for the HIMARS, 21,000 rounds of 155 millimeter artillery shells, 10,000 rounds of 120 millimeter mortar, 100 high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, Humvees, 400 grenade launchers. I wonder if that's going to be the Mark 19 Mod 3. Please let it be the Mark 19. Yes. Small arms, optics, and more than 20 million rounds of small arms ammunition. Demolitions equipment for obstacle clearing, preparing for those defensive lines, and cold weather protective gear, getting ready for the winter. So they are refurbishing additional Hawk missiles, which were provided by Spain. And we're seeing in total, the United States has committed more than $19.3 billion in security assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration. Since 2014, the United States has committed more than $21.4 billion in security assistance to Ukraine, and more than $18.6 billion since the beginning of Russia's unprovoked and brutal invasion on February the 24th. Now, something I see quite often, and a lot of people talk about, is the fact that something that I hear a lot, especially from American domestic politics, and I do not talk American domestic politics. I'm not picking a side. I don't care. But one of the big talking points, especially for American domestic politics this year, because it is an election year and the elections just took place, was why are we spending billions of dollars on this? You know, why do we keep sending billions of dollars when there's so many issues here at home? And there's a very simple answer to this. $1 billion is a lot of money to me. It's a lot of money to you. It's a lot of money to your business. Wherever you work. It's a lot of money. Right? But in the scale of how much money the United States government has, it means nothing. The United States budget for last year was and this year is over $4 trillion. Trillion with a T. So that is, so anytime I hear the rhetoric about, how, we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, we've sent $20 billion, $21 billion over the last 3 years ish. The U.S. defense budget alone for this year was something like $778 billion. So we've sent nothing. I think I did the math one time and it came out to, well, the number was so ridiculously small that it wasn't actually a number, but it turned into like the amount of money that we've sent ever to Ukraine came out to like 0.0000129% of a percent of the U.S. budget for the last 3 years. Or sorry, since 2014. It came out to like that small. Like it's stupid small. So being very much a bias for Ukraine, right? I've done the math because it's public knowledge. I mean, it's publicly known what the budget is. You can go and you can find it. You can find every bill proposed to Congress. I mean, you can. And the amount of money that is being spent, the government essentially spends as much on toilet paper per year as we have spent on Ukraine. They spend that much on copy paper per year as we spend on Ukraine in total. So before I ever hear anybody talk about how we should stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. It's a lot of money to me and you, but it means absolutely nothing to the government. The U.S. government could burn $20 billion to keep itself warm if it wanted to. Or because they can. Think of the Joker in the Batman series, where he has that giant pile of money and he just douses it gasoline and lights it on fire. Yeah, like that would be $20 billion to the U.S. government. They spend $20 billion on stupid things. So, yeah, I'm not all that worried. There's no like argument to stop funding Ukraine, because we haven't really actually funded Ukraine. We've given Ukraine a bunch of hand-me-down equipment that's completely obsolete for us, and we don't use it anymore. Like the M113 or the Avenger system. We don't use the Avenger anymore. We have better things. We don't use the Avenger. We don't use the M113. We don't use Soviet equipment. The newest things we have essentially given Ukraine are NASAMS, M4s, which we're the Marine Corps is getting rid of M4s. They're going to the M27IR. So they're getting a new rifle. So that's a whole stockpile of stuff that they don't need anymore. Like, we don't use like I said, we don't use the M113. It's obsolete. The Humvee is being phased out for MRAPs and MAPVs and basically anything with Oshkosh written on it. So, yeah, I'm not... There is no grounds. Anti-security aid arguments have absolutely no grounds. If you do any basic research into it, has no grounds whatsoever. Anyone that's actually able to do basic simple math with a calculator, because I can't count past 30, but I can use a calculator. And when you see E's at the end of numbers, you know it means nothing. You know it's super, super small and is basically irrelevant. And that's what happens when you do the math for those calculations, those numbers. It comes out to such tiny numbers, they put E's at the end of them. When you start seeing alphabets in your numbers, it means your argument's destroyed. That's what I'm saying. And that's as far as into domestic politics as I'm going to get on that. Coming down here and into Florida. Florida picks up after Hurricane Nicole kills at least 5. Very late season hurricane here coming in. The National Hurricane Center said the center of Nicole moved on shore Thursday at 3 a.m. Eastern Time and just south of Vero Beach, Florida. Nicole was packing maximum sustained winds of 75 miles an hour, making it a Category 1 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Shortly after making landfall, Nicole was downgraded to a tropical storm as it began to weaken over the Florida peninsula. It later weakened to a tropical depression over the southeastern United States on Thursday evening. At least 5 deaths in Florida have been blamed on Nicole. Officials say 24 condos and hotels, including at least 10 buildings of at least 10 stories tall, are now unsafe and structurally dangerous. And it has completely eroded sections of the beach that have made buildings just completely destroyed. And Trump says, well said, as usual, Paul. Yeah, I saw the arguments for like defense of the free world and stuff like that. Like, Americans don't care about that. They care about money. Why is it important for me is the question. And so, therefore, I have the answer. Just like if you want to go on vacation again and not hate being there, you should probably send aid and help these people. that, we get into some of the interesting topics of the night. We actually jump right off the coast of Florida and over into the Bermuda Triangle. Oh, yes, we're going into you'd think we'd be going into something like mystery or something. No mystery's been solved. It's something that we already knew has happened, but something interesting was discovered. Long lost wreckage from the Challenger spacecraft, which ended up blowing up over the Bermuda Triangle and over the Gulf of Mexico, killing all 7 astronauts on board, including one teacher, who was the first teacher meant to go into space. That occurred on January the 28th, 1986. It's seared into the minds of everyone who happened to watch it and was alive to actually witness it. A piece of the Challenger space shuttle, after it blew up, going into orbit, it spread everything all over the basically in the Atlantic, and as the team, so NASA confirmed that the debris found by a team that was from the History Channel, searching for a World War II era aircraft, found this, and they did end up calling them and confirmed that it was indeed a piece of the Challenger. They believe that this is from the belly of the aircraft. They believe that this is the underside of the aircraft. That part of it, and they believe that this section is actually much larger, but that it is partially buried underneath the sand. So NASA did confirm that it was indeed a piece of the Challenger spacecraft, and History Channel has released a piece of this snippet here of what they were doing when they were down there.
Yeah, they're wearing away. They're sitting on top of the orange tile. They're kind of loose though. Probably why there's only a couple of them. The rest of them wore away. Tiles under the tiles too. Look at these rivets. They're like smooth. This part's probably been exposed for the longest time. So much more of this goes under the sand here. So what do you think this is, Jim? Definitely an aircraft. I think we need to talk to NASA.
The Bermuda Triangle into.
And we're going to stop that before we get to the ad. But if you want more information on that, you can go and you can check out Live Science there, who actually has an article on it. But yes, so that's a part of the Challenger spacecraft, which ended up blowing up in 1986 as it was lifting off, killing all 7 crew members on board. A piece was discovered off the coast of Florida by a History Channel team who was looking for a World War II era aircraft. I have a feeling I know what they're looking for, and it has yet to be found, and it has been searched for since the end of World War II. There's a flight of 5 different Avenger torpedo bombers. I'm not mistaken. 5 Avenger torpedo bombers, which went missing off the coast of Florida in the Bermuda Triangle back right after World War II during a training mission. And they have no idea what happened to them. And coming out of Hawaii, we see freckles of the sun. So this is coming actually off of the sun, but several dark splotches known as sunspots were seen on the sun's surface on November the 10th. These regions are associated with solar activity, as they are often the origins of giant eruptions, and they can be much larger than Earth. See, little freckles on the sun. Once again, these are larger than Earth in some cases. So in case you're feeling very minuscule in life, or if you need an ego check because you're feeling a little too big, just remember the tiny freckles on the sun are as big as the planet you stand on. And with that, that is all the news in the world today. At least everything that we are covering for the day. I hope that you found this informative. I hope that we have a chance to kind of celebrate some of the victories that happened today, but also remember some of the losses that happened, significant losses of life and unfortunate suffering throughout the world. And I hope that you guys take this opportunity to continue to support, not just Ukraine, but the many people that are in need of help. 345 million people require humanitarian assistance. That's an up from 80 million but a year ago. And it's the most amount of people ever needing humanitarian assistance in history. And there's at no point a higher amount of refugees in the world ever on recorded history. And that's coming from the United Nations. One person every 4 seconds dies of starvation. One child every minute, every single minute, a child becomes severely malnourished and is on the verge of death as a result. So quite a lot of things happening in the world, even though we may not be covering them. But luckily, there's a lot of organizations in the description to be able to give back, to help people that are affected by the war in Ukraine, by different situations that are going throughout the world. And we're constantly trying to continue to get more. So if you have some, please send them to a staff member on our Discord or on Twitter or what have you. And hopefully you guys are able to give back and help make people's lives better as a result. And so with that, thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you guys will be back tomorrow for another 24 hours of news and review, 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's 4 p.m. Central tomorrow. Please, in the meantime, please be safe. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. And with that, my name is Paul from the New News. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your night. And hopefully we will see you tomorrow. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стояти в головах і чутно кличить, ідіть нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуємо. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять у головах і чутно кличить, ідіть нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стрія до волноваги чутно кличі, дітям нахуй, тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.